He thought the HOA was just strict, until he discovered the president had been entering his home while he was at work. What began as petty citations turned into a terrifying game of control, theft, and surveillance. But this time, she picked the wrong house. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay to the end. You won't believe how it all ends in court. Something felt off the moment he stepped through the front door. It wasn't anything obvious. No broken glass, no blaring alarms. But the atmosphere had shifted. The throw pillows he'd left precisely angled on the couch were scattered. A neat stack of papers sat on the coffee table, though he hadn't touched them in days. Even his collection of travel trinkets had been rearranged, their usual order disrupted just enough to unsettle him. "Hello?" he called out, voice echoing into the silence.
No réponse.
He slowly lowered his laptop bag to the floor, unease crawling up his spine. Had someone broken in?
Yet nothing was missing. Tes vestis on the wall, valuable untouched.
But someone had definitely been here. Then he remembered the new security cameras he'd installed just last weekend. Small, discreet, motion-activated, linked to cloud storage. Hands trembling slightly, he pulled out his phone and opened the app. The timeline showed multiple motion alerts from 2 hours earlier. He tapped the first alert, and froze. There she was. Karen Mitchell, the stone-faced president of the Oakwood Estates HOA, stood in his living room. Clipboard in hand, lips pinched in her usual expression of disapproval. He watched stunned, as she wandered through his home like it was her own. She took photos of furniture, opened drawers, and even examined his bookshelf. At one point, she plucked a ceramic figurine from the shelf, studied it with disdain, and placed it in her oversized handbag. He watched the footage in disbelief. Karen had entered his home. Illegally. And this wasn't just curiosity, it was methodical, deliberate. She'd clearly come to enforce HOA violations, from inside the house. When he moved into Oakwood Estates 3 months earlier, he'd been warned. The HOA had a reputation. His realtor had slid a 50-page binder across the desk with a strained smile and a single warning: just follow the rules and you'll be fine. That was a lie. Within a week of moving in, a violation notice appeared on his door.
The offense?
His mailbox was Prussian blue instead of colonial navy. To most people, indistinguishable. But not to Karen Mitchell. She'd signed the citation in looping cursive, adding a handwritten note: "Welcome to Oakwood. Compliance ensures harmony." He repainted the mailbox. Then it was his garden gnome. Section 7, paragraph 12, Karen had recited. Outdoor decorations must preserve the community's dignified aesthetic.
A gnome fishing?
Whimsical, not dignified. She'd smiled thinly, gripping her clipboard like a weapon. Perhaps a classical urn. He removed the gnome.
Next came the wind chime, tout noisy.
A bird feeder, attracting unapproved wildlife.
A dorma, tout inch to hide.
He complied with each absurd demand, but it never ended. His home became a magnet for citations, while other houses remained untouched. Then things escalated. Violation notices began referencing things that were impossible to see from the street.
Excessive indoor illumination.
Furnishings clashing with community decor. Even his houseplants were cited, non-regulation species visible through upper-level windows. He began to suspect the worst. How could she know what was inside unless she was getting closer? Peering in?
Or worse, coming inside.
That night, he ordered security cameras.
1 in the living room. 1 in the kitchen.
1 in the hallway.
1 at the front door.
Hidden.
Smart. Motion triggered. For 3 days, nothing happened.
Then came Thursday. Thursday, 2:17 p.m. The alert lit up his phone as he sat in a coffee shop downtown. A motion detection notice from his front door camera. He tapped the notification, expecting maybe a package drop-off. Instead, he saw Karen Mitchell. Again. This time, the footage was crystal clear. Karen stood at his front door, glancing around the empty street before digging into her handbag and pulling out a key. His key. She inserted it without hesitation, turned the knob, and stepped inside like she belonged. His stomach dropped. She hadn't just broken in once. This was routine. She moved with the confidence of someone who believed she was above consequence. For the next 27 minutes, the camera captured everything. She inspected furniture, opened cabinets, took measurements, snapped photos. She even rifled through papers in his office and shook her head disapprovingly at his closet. She took things. The ceramic figurine, a framed photo from the hall, a decorative paperweight. All placed neatly in her cavernous purse. Then she calmly relocked the door and vanished. He watched the footage 4 times. Shock turned into fury. This wasn't petty HOA harassment anymore. This was trespassing. This was theft. This was criminal. That night, he called his cousin Michael, a property law attorney. When Michael saw the footage, his voice turned hard.
Call the police.
Immediately. This isn't a gray area. She broke into your home and stole from you. HOA authority ends at the curb. He filed a report that evening, handing over the footage to a skeptical officer who grew quiet as the video played. How'd she get your key? The officer finally asked. A good question.
Meb a leftover from a build DS master set. Meb someone on the inside.
Regardless, it was abuse of power. The next morning, he changed all his locks and upgraded his security. Doorbell cameras, reinforced locks, alarm systems. Then he drafted a formal letter to the HOA board, excluding Karen. He didn't mention the police report. Let her think she was still undetected. For the next week, he played his part perfectly. Greeted Karen with a nod when she passed by measuring hedges. Attended the HOA meeting, listened as she preached about community standards. But the cameras kept recording. 2 more times that week, she entered his home. The first time, she brought a measuring tape to inspect his shower curtain. The second, she used a swatch book to compare his backsplash color. She even vacuumed dust from beneath his fridge. Each visit was documented, time-stamped, and backed up. The footage formed a dossier, precise, undeniable, damning. Detective Martinez from the local precinct took over the investigation. She confirmed they were collecting evidence and interviewing neighbors who suspected similar violations. The footage is strong, she said. But if we catch her in the act again, we can arrest her immediately. He didn't have to wait long. The following Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after installing the cameras, he received another motion alert at work. Karen had returned, this time with a shopping bag. She wasn't just inspecting now. She'd brought replacement items. He dialed Detective Martinez instantly. Officers are en route, she confirmed. He raced home, heart hammering. When he arrived, 2 police cruisers sat quietly down the block. Martinez met him at the corner. She's still inside, the detective said.
Are you ready?
He nodded. Calm settled over him. Together with Detective Martinez and 2 uniformed officers, he approached his front door. From outside, everything looked normal.
No sign of the HOA folding within.
He inserted the key, turned the knob, and stepped inside. Karen stood in the living room, mid-replacement of a beige throw pillow. Her face twisted through confusion, disbelief, and finally indignation. She clutched her clipboard to her chest like a shield. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. Karen Mitchell, Martinez said, her tone measured as she revealed her badge.
You are trespassing.
Can you explain how you entered this home and why you're here? Karen flushed red. I'm conducting a compliance inspection, she replied with manufactured confidence. As president of Oakwood Estates HOA, it is my duty to ensure every property adheres to community standards. Do you have the homeowner's permission? Martinez asked pointedly. I don't need permission, Karen shot back, her voice rising. Our bylaws grant the board access to all properties. No, they don't, he cut in. Calm, but firm.
I've read every word.
There is no clause that allows any board member to enter someone's home.
Not without permission. You're trespassing. And you've stolen from me.
Karen's eyes flared. That's ridiculous. I'm maintaining the neighborhood's value. Your throw pillows, your art choices, they degrade our aesthetic. I'm doing what needs to be done. Martinez exchanged a glance with the officer, who stepped forward. Mrs. Mitchell, you're under arrest for unlawful entry and theft. You have the right to remain silent. Karen's jaw dropped as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Her bluster collapsed into sputtering denial.
D'ici Saint-San.
I was improving his home. You're making a mistake. We'll discuss everything at the station, Martinez said coolly. Right now, we're dealing with multiple unauthorized entries and confirmed theft. As Karen was escorted from the house, neighbors began gathering outside. Curious faces peeked from porches and windows.
Whisper fillette the air.
Some followed the officers, snapping photos. Others turned to him, asking hushed questions. He didn't speak. Not yet. The next evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting and asked him to attend. Word had spread. Over 50 residents packed the community center, more than anyone could remember attending. With permission from his attorney and the detective, he queued up a carefully edited video. Silence fell as the screen lit up. Footage rolled, Karen unlocking his front door, entering rooms, taking items, measuring, judging, photographing.
A pattern of calme intrusion, arrogance, and control.
When the lights came back on, the room erupted. She told me my indoor plants were unhealthy, one woman cried out. How did she even see them? She scolded me about my medicine cabinet being disorganized, said another. I assumed she'd gotten permission. Residents stood up one after another, realizing they'd all experienced the same strange violations. What had seemed like overzealous rule enforcement now revealed itself as something darker, systematic invasion. The board voted immediately to remove Karen from her position and offered full cooperation to the ongoing investigation. They also passed a bylaw revision. No board member would ever again enter a home without written consent. Karen's fall from power was swift. The day after the meeting, the district attorney filed formal charges, multiple counts of unlawful entry, theft, trespassing, and abuse of authority. The community watched in stunned disbelief as headlines spread through local news. HOA president arrested for breaking into homes. Then came the search warrant. Police combed through Karen's home and discovered a chilling collection: trinkets, framed photos, personal documents, even prescription bottles. Items taken from various houses across Oakwood Estates, all tucked neatly away like trophies. Her entire living room had become a grotesque gallery of unauthorized acquisitions.
Most damning of all,
her own security system. Karen had installed exterior surveillance to monitor neighbors for violations, but the footage inadvertently captured her leaving and returning to homes that weren't hers, carrying objects she never brought in. The timestamps aligned with reported incidents from other residents. Ironically, the very obsession with control that drove her behavior now served as damning evidence against her. At her arraignment, Karen appeared in court looking hollow, her usual composure cracked. Her attorney entered a plea of not guilty, claiming she had acted within her role as HOA president. The judge didn't buy it. Bail was set at $50,000. The courtroom murmured as the judge outlined the charges. Up to 5 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Karen's face twisted between disbelief and fear as the bailiff led her out. On her way past him, she paused, just a moment, and hissed under her breath, "I was protecting property values." He didn't respond. Instead, he returned home to find 3 handwritten notes slid under his door. Each from a neighbor. Each expressing thanks. One included cookies. Another simply read, "You weren't crazy. Thank you for catching her." The days that followed brought a strange calm. For the first time since moving in, he felt at peace in his own house. No more notices.
No more citations.
No strangers inspecting his backyard while pretending to admire hedges. The HOA board scheduled another meeting, this time to openly discuss a broader overhaul of the association's powers. Residents now questioned what they'd accepted for years. One man spoke up and suggested a resident-led oversight committee. Another proposed removing the most invasive rules entirely. What had started as a quiet individual violation had turned into a community reckoning. And Karen? She remained under house arrest, her trial pending. News outlets painted her as both a cautionary tale and a bizarre suburban villain. Internet forums dubbed her the decor dictator and home intrusion Karen. Footage of her arrest circulated widely, complete with the infamous moment she clutched a throw pillow like it was a crime scene artifact. But for him, this wasn't about internet fame. It was about reclaiming peace, privacy, and the basic right to feel safe behind a locked door. Weeks passed. The neighborhood began to breathe again, slowly shedding the paranoia that had settled like dust. The security cameras stayed up. No one was taking chances. But there were fewer whispers, fewer lingering glances toward windows. Oakwood Estates was learning how to function without fear. Then came the trial. The courtroom was packed, mostly with residents who had once avoided conflict, now eager to see justice served. Karen sat stiffly beside her lawyer, wearing a navy suit that tried, and failed, to project dignity. Her expression was flat, unreadable. But when the prosecution played the footage from the hidden cameras, her unlocking the door, pocketing figurines, rearranging furniture, she flinched. The footage from her own security system sealed the case. Witness after witness testified. A single mother recounted how Karen cited her for non-uniform curtain patterns, and later discovered her bedroom had been entered. An elderly veteran described the disappearance of his late wife's keepsake box. All had assumed the worst, that they were imagining things or misplacing items. Now they knew better. When it was his turn, he spoke clearly, without anger. Just facts. He explained how the intrusions began.
The absurde violation.
The subtle shifts in his home. The moment suspicion turned to certainty, and how that certainty became justice. The defense tried to paint Karen as misunderstood. A passionate leader who took her role too seriously. But the mountain of video evidence and the growing chorus of voices left no room for doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty, on all counts. The judge's ruling was stern. Karen Mitchell was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with mandatory counseling for obsessive-compulsive behavior and abuse of authority. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. Karen stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a thin line, refusing to look at anyone. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. He gave none. The story wasn't about him, it was about boundaries, respect, and the right to privacy. He returned home to find a small note taped to his door. It read, "Because of you, we all sleep easier. Thank you." That evening, he poured a glass of wine and sat on his porch as the sun dipped below the treetops. The breeze was quiet. No measuring tapes. No clipboards. Just peace. He knew the scars would linger. Trust isn't easily rebuilt, but the healing had begun. One home at a time. And deep inside, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Karen Mitchell would never cross his threshold again. What would you do if your HOA president broke into your home? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to check out the next HOA nightmare story linked at the end. You won't want to miss it.